Riz Ahmed, British Pakistani actor, rapper, award winner, and for the longest time I really thought he was Agent Stone. In 2020 he dropped a short film called The Long Goodbye and a trouser film called Mowgli. Mowgli follows this rapper dude who's about to hit it big when he gets wrecked by an autoimmune disease, and The Long Goodbye follows his family celebrating their dulki when they get wrecked by a right-wing march. They're both peak and I highly recommend, especially for any possible Pakistani viewers. Obviously spoilers for both, and warning, awful topics will be discussed, so if you're a sensitive dude you might want to dip now. These films are actually the reason for the first ever Muslim to win at the Oscars. They both feature Riz Ahmed as the main protagonist, they're both written by him, they both feature his music, and they're both pretty personal metaphors for his real struggles in Britain and his identity. Also, by the way, The Long Goodbye's protagonist is never named, so I'm just going to refer to him as Des from now on. The two films have got this kind of similar handheld shaky cam style, a common thing with these social realist dramas, and the camera gets even shakier as the scenes get more intense and frantic, like when the racist militia pull up. Speaking of which, I kind of interpret that as The Long Goodbye criticising the Conservative Party here in the UK for being infamously apathetic to xenophobia, especially post-Brexit. While the masked thugs in The Long Goodbye might be more reflective of the far right, they should also bring to mind our government, who are still detaining and deporting essentially innocent people under the auspices of our flawed immigration system, writes Mr. Charlie Brinkhurst Cuff from We Present. Despite one being 9 times longer than the other, they have the same kind of narrative structure. Act 1 is the comfortable status quo with an optimistic anticipation of something to look forward to on the horizon, like the wedding or Zed's big break. Also, I kind of love and hate the really awful foreshadowing of Des politely asking if the guests feel disturbed in any way. Act 2 sees intense tragedy strike that irreversibly destroys the status quo, one of these obviously being a little more extreme. And Act 3 is the melancholy reaction to the major event, with Mowgli having a bit more of a happy ending. Another similarity is the prevalence of Mowgli as a representation, so much that he made it into the title of one of these films and he's compared to the protagonist in their big rap in the other. The Jungle Book has had a big cultural impact, especially in the West in the 60s, because it kind of challenged a lot of the typical perceptions of South Asians in Hollywood and how they're represented outside of Bollywood. Zed and Mowgli share the theme of being split between two worlds, unsure of their identity. Whereas Des and Mowgli share the archetype of being a man among the wolves, out of place and unwelcomed, which is how the far right view the British South Asian community. I think Mr. Ahmed referencing this is powerful, especially because of the social impact of the Jungle Book in America when it first dropped. Something I think is pretty cool is the thematic unity between both projects. In The Long Goodbye, Des criticises right-wing Britain for claiming to be proud of their country while persecuting those who built it up to what it is today, something very prevalent in general post-colonial UK. However, in Mowgli, it's Uno reverse, because Zed shallowly expresses his love for his heritage and Islam and his blood, but he never visits or acknowledges his family and even avoids the culture, despite that subject matter being essential in his rapping success, something pointed out to him by his girlfriend.
For someone who raps so much about where they're from, when was the last time you went home? When was the last time you actually spent time with your family?
His arc is about re-embracing his home and his family, quite literally, and being truly proud and giving his passion meaning once again. I guess you could say he learns to walk the walk. Both of them explore themes of generational trauma, the fear that you can pass down your worst fears and traumas to your children and continue the cycle. I think that we need to talk about Kevin, Kubo and the Two Strings, and God of War explore this really cool as well. Both Zed and Des and their father figures are connected by the pain that they endure. In The Long Goodbye, it's more of a dystopia where the horrors of the partition are replicated in post-Brexit Britain. So Des's father has to watch his son go through the same things that he fought so hard to hopefully avoid by immigrating to the UK. And Des himself has to witness his son figure going through the same thing. In Mowgli, it's actually the partition itself that causes, as Bashir's fractured identity caused by the horrors of the partition is inherited by Zed and manifests in his illness, where his white blood cells can't recognize themselves, which is like a metaphor because, he doesn't really know who he is. I'm pretty sure that the scene with the the silks in The Long Goodbye is supposed to be a metaphor for the generational trauma of both Des and Bashir. Des tries to hide away the broken wall under something appealing, metaphorically hiding the trauma with the illusion of peace. Bashir refuses to speak of partition, while Des ignores the right-wing riots. Oh my god. While Des ignores the right-wing riots on TV, both failing to prepare their sons for the tragedy awaiting them, even worsening their trauma even more by trying to hide it. This idea of the younger generation suffering the same oppression you did, the idea that you failed to raise them in a better world than you did is, pretty scary, but it's also tragically relevant towards South Asians today. I'm not trying to compare the partition to post-Brexit Britain or the post-Brexit Britain to the partition. That's not the point. But the point is that the Islamic community and every minority that's ever existed has always faced oppression and struggle in wherever they are, whatever time they're in. And Riz Ahmed shows us with these films how trauma can bleed into our lives even after the conflict has long ended. And Mowgli suggests that a productive way to deal with this is to educate yourself on your culture and the stuff that it's been through and reconnect with it, while also making room to blaze a new legacy for yourself. So the moral of the story: if you see two fishes in a pond scrapping, an Englishman probably just passed by.